feel now having got this engine put back together? How does, like, are you like totally sick of it, or are you like, thank God?
It's nice to not have a giant pile of parts laying around. That definitely takes a little bit of stress off, but until you can push a little red button and this thing spins around on its own, it's not done for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my name is Chaseontwowheels. This is my buddy Brian. On this episode of Wreck Bike Repo, which is a show where we take wreck bikes, turn them into dream bikes, and then we give them away to the people that support us over on Patreon. Today's video, you guys can already see the link. We are rebuilding our entire engine today.
Well,
it's not going to be today. It's going to take part over a few days.
In this video. We're going to rebuild an entire engine in this video.
How disgusting. I don't think we need to do any more intro because this video is long enough. If you guys want to win the motorcycles that we build, top link down below takes you to patreon.com/chaseontwowheels. You can win motorcycles there that we rebuild like we're doing today. So if you guys are ready to watch Brian entirely put an engine back together from literally just pieces on a table.
If you guys can't tell, they can see this. Some of the stuff that goes in it here on the table, and then the rest of the stuff that goes inside is up there on the shelf. So we have
it's going to be a lot.
Lots of stuff to go into these two big chunks of aluminum here, and lots of time and lots of aggravation.
Don't worry.
There may be some tools flying eventually. There'll be a lot of bleeping. And there'll be a lot of cleaning.
Don't worry, I'm not gonna be in this video other than this intro. I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna get the hell out of the way. I'm gonna be on camera. Brian's gonna be doing what he's best at. I'm gonna be doing what I'm best at. We're on A-team status. Everybody's just where they need to be. Let's go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's put an engine together.
Okay. This is about as clean as I'm going to get this in here. I do still have a tiny bit of scraping left to do on this, but it's really, really hard to do in here, so I'm going to do it on the table. But all the grimes are cleaned off. All right, can you grab that little bucket again? I'm going to put this right where that little bucket is at. All right, I think we're clean for now. We have cases, side covers, oil pan, valve cover. The only other part of the engine that is externally are cylinders and the cylinder head. The head is brand new in a box.
Right.
The cylinders don't really get too dirty, but we could always clean them later. That'll be quick.
Okay.
There's not a lot of surface to them,
right,
so they'll be pretty fast.
Are you saying this stuff needs to air dry now, or?
This stuff needs to dry.
Uh-huh. And
then we'll clean it with a high flash solvent and spray.
Okay.
Hit it with air at the same time. Spray it, hit with air, spray it, hit with air till it's perfectly clean, dry, squeaky clean. Like when you wash your dishes, you dry them like.
Right.
That's what we're looking for.
How long do we need to let these air dry?
This will probably. I mean, we could move right to contact cleaner now if we want to, but
okay.
There is still like some puddles of parts washer on this that I would like to drip out. So I mean, we can get back to this tomorrow.
Cool. So we'll wrap for today. This is day 1. We'll see you guys on day 2.
And then day 3.
And then day 4.
And then day 4.
Oh, hold on. We'll just do a slow pan down. And then... Any last words for day 1, Brian?
No, and then...
We are in the toilet. Day 2 of cleaning Brian, as you guys can see, is already hard at work. Brian, what kind of chemical are you using to clean further?
Well, after this thing dried off, it left a really, really fine layer of actual just dirt. It didn't just leave chemical behind. There was a lot of dirt still left on it. So I'm trying to use a couple of different chemicals right now and figure out which one is going to be easiest. Right now I'm just using a little bit of Honda polish, which is really good for taking light dirt off. I'm not sure if that's what I'm going to end up with because some of these parts may be a little too grimy for that, but it seems to be working on this case half that I'm doing now, so I'm going to continue with this for now. But if I change chemicals, I'll let you know.
I was about to say, if you change chemicals, let us know.
Yeah.
Or just, you know, tap in on like, hey, turns out this was working. Okay, back. Uh-oh, Brian's moving on to a different chemical.
And you're going to have to follow me because I'm going to have to go to the garbage can.
What chemical, Brian? What are we switching
So
to?
there is still a lot of liquid parts cleaner in the inside of the engine cases. We need to make sure that that stuff is gone. So I'm going to take it over to the garbage can, spray the piss out of it with some parts cleaner.
This is the stuff you're working on now, and this is to get the inside stuff.
Or that one. It's all the same stuff. Brake and parts washer, brake and parts cleaner.
So I'm following you to the garbage?
Yeah, we're going this way. Holy shit.
Nope, we don't say stuff like that, Brian.
There are 3 timing marks on this one gear.
That means it's very precise at where that thing needs to go.
Absolutely. Like, don't f it up. That's what that means. So if you could see those 3 little painted marks on that gear, there's 2 white ones and a yellow one. The 2 white ones look like a tooth from probably the crankshaft here is going to mate up with that. Yep, right here. So there's a single timing mark here, double timing mark there. Those 3 need to be lined up. So this one needs to be in between those 2.
What's the yellow one?
Now the yellow one is probably, that's a good question. I don't know what the yellow one's for yet. It's got a little cutout in it.
Yeah, so it's got to slot
So it's
in.
got to be timed to something else.
It's pretty interesting.
Maybe that's part of setting this adjustment.
Is the yellow?
Is the yellow? I'm not real sure yet.
We'll have to get a
We have the manual for it. Alright, so you guys see this little groove right here? Comes around this pin. So this pin is actually an oiling hole. And there's a little tiny jet in there that controls how much oil goes in there. It connects to this one. These 2 are going to oil your transmission. These grooves right here, there's a couple of them. There's one there, there's one there. These are to collect any residual oil and feed it back down into the engine case. It's important that you don't fill those with any sort of gasket material when you're assembling everything.
Is that why you do the tappy boy instead of the smush?
It's exactly why I tap it instead of doing the smush, because if you do this with a smush, you're going to fill that.
Yeah, because that's shallow.
It's very shallow. These are deep. You definitely don't want to get anything in these because these are like oiling passages. So you definitely don't want to get anything in there. I'm pretty sure that when we get to the assembly portion, there will be no gasket sealer here. It'll be here, you know, along this outside edge, pretty sure that there's not going to be, maybe there'll be some here, but not in this area. Okay. Just because they don't want you to, you want to make sure you don't get anything in that. So that is our last engine piece that needs to be cleaned. Everything else is now clean and dry.
Well, in that case, throw us to day 3. What are we doing?
You can stop watching me clean stuff now.
What are we doing tomorrow, or the metaphorical tomorrow, Brian?
So the metaphorical tomorrow, hopefully we'll start reassembly.
We'll see you guys then. Later. Give us a peace sign or something. Well,
does that work? I'll see you guys later.
That's a sign.
It's a Jersey bird for all of you.
All right, guys, so welcome to day 3 of our Put Our Engine Back Together game. If you guys haven't watched days 1 and 2, all Brian did was get the engine parts cleaned. Literally took 2 days to do that. So today is the first actual day, and I know a lot of these guys have been excited for this part. Obviously, okay. Nobody's excited to watch you clean it. But
nobody is, not even
nobody
me.
Should be excited for that. So today's the first day where things are going to start going back together. We're going to keep this same format. I'm going to be on camera. Brian's going to be putting stuff back together. We are a 2-man team today. Is there anything preparatory to putting this together? Any comments we should make before the shit hits the fan?
At this point, have a repair manual handy.
We do have our PDF manual that we got from E-Manuals. Yeah, shout out to them. Okay, so if I need to look anything up, I can look up stuff for you as well.
Actually, we're probably going to need to bring that laptop over here and have it on the bench next to me.
I'm average. I'm the definition of guy average.
Are you feeling short or are you feeling tall today?
Well, I just checked my posture and I was kind of bent over.
So you're feeling short at the moment?
Yes.
Well, straighten out your back and grab that crankshaft in that brown box all the way up against the back of the wall there on the top shelf.
Ah, that is a tall man's job. Let me call Luke real quick. Just kidding.
The worst possible thing in the world you can do is drop this.
Okay. I dedicated all of my strength.
And now you're spent.
Yep, I'm done now. All right, guys, I'm out.
New crankshaft. Old crankshaft. New crankshaft, old crankshaft.
Can you show us the
new crankshaft, old crankshaft?
Stop saying it and show it. Show less, do more, Brian. Does it smell like a
crankshaft?
All right, hold it right there and let me get it.
Smells like cardboard. Huh. Okay, so new crankshaft, old crankshaft. They look a little different.
Yeah. Here, I'll show you guys I'll show them to you side by side with them. So this is the old one. Wow, they look totally different, man.
This is what happens after you cook your crankshaft, and this is one pre-cooked. So our cases are clean, they're dry. All of the old plain bearings have been removed, and I went through and just inspected all of these places where the bearings sit. Where the bearings sit are called journals. Just check all the journals, make sure they're not damaged. Everything looks good here. I already checked the other half of it. Now, the hardest part to get right on building your engine is getting the right bearings.
That process is not fun online.
Okay, so there is a really, really nice little chart in the repair manual. If you don't have the repair manual, it is almost impossible to get this right without lots and lots of measuring. Okay, we're gonna need the manual now.
Already, perfect.
Yep. We just want to make sure that we have all the dowel pins in the right places. Everything is oriented correctly within the engine case.
So would you say that an engine rebuild, there is a requirement to have a PDF manual?
I mean, unless you've done it 100 times and you know exactly where everything goes in what order, absolutely need to have a manual for this. I'm going to start with replacing the cushions in the balancer and reinstalling the balancer. really say a whole lot while I was doing that. I was a little focused, but
by all means, stay focused when putting the engine back together.
I'm gonna go back and just explain what I did.
Okay.
So the first shaft that went in was the upper transmission shaft.
Okay.
It's lower in this case because this is the upper half of the engine case and it's upside down. So the upper transmission shaft, or the main shaft in this case, goes in first. Then the shift drum goes in. Then the 3 shift forks go in. Then the rod that the shift forks ride on goes in. And then the counter shaft, or output shaft, secondary transmission shaft, whatever you want to call it, goes in afterwards. On this bearing there is this little nipple. There's also one on this side.
Okay, I see the nipple on that side.
And then one on this side.
We got it.
Okay. And then there is also this ring in this bearing. Okay, so this ring needs to fit in this groove. That tab needs to fit in that groove. And the lip of this seal needs to fit in that groove. All at the same time, you have to drop the transmission onto the shift forks. And then there's also this bearing slides in this housing, and that pin fits in that groove. So everything kind of goes in at the same time. It can be a little difficult. Okay, so you rotate the bearing so the nipple is in the groove. I got my clip in the groove, seal in its groove. And now our transmission spins. This is actually neutral. This is where the sprocket goes on. So it'll just spin.
That's where the front sprocket goes?
Yeah, this is where the front sprocket
goes. Wow, so all that is happening right behind that front sprocket.
Sprocket is connected to it.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Now's the time to double, triple, quadruple,
Absolutely.
as many times as you need to check.
So taking your time and doing this step by step, page by page, line by line from the manual will get rid of that nauseating feeling when it's time to push the button to make it start.
Right.
For the most part. Sometimes it's still
I feel like you'll still have that feeling.
You do. It's just a lot smaller.
Because you're like, I went.
You're like, all right, I went through it. It should be good. I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll get these 2 bolts started so this thing's not flapping around. And I'll turn the case toward you so you can see what's going on.
I hate things flapping around.
Do you hear that? It's like stuff is just rubbing together.
Right.
So once I tighten this bolt to its spec, that should be silent.
We'll find out soon.
It just takes like that 1/2 millimeter of it being compressed into the engine case that'll get rid of that. Man, that got really heavy really fast. That 2 transmission shafts and the shift drum are heavy. Now I'm not tightening any one bolt all the way because I want to make sure that this shaft goes in straight. You can, if you tighten one side, you can start driving the bearing in a little bit crooked, and that can cause you some issues later. So this is our balancer shaft that we replaced the cushions in a few minutes ago. There is, there's a timing line on this weight.
Right.
If you can zoom into that.
Right.
All right, so there's a little mark right there, and that has to line up with that little yellow tab on this gear.
Cool.
So, and the reason for that is so these timing marks will match where the weight is. Otherwise, these marks mean nothing if this isn't timed to the actual gear itself. So. So we have our top half of our crankcases prepped. The crankshaft is in it and has a nice smooth rotation here. This is the timing mark for our, not really sure where that needs to be, but we could always move it if we need to, but we'll leave this facing this way. We're now going to take the upper half of the, the lower half of the engine cases, and we're going to put our gasket sealer on it and then lay it on top of the top half and start bolting stuff together. So after taking a better look at the repair manual, which is why it's so important to have one accessible when you're doing this, before putting the engine case lower onto the upper, I have to attach all the connecting rods for the pistons. Otherwise, you can't get to the hardware to install the connecting rods.
Makes sense.
So we're going to start that now. We have our connecting rods. And our connecting rods have a size identification on them. See the A3 right here? Mm-hmm. So the 3 is the number that we need, and that coincides with the letter that's on the engine case, or excuse me, on the crankshaft. We already did the engine case. So on the webbing, just like for the engine case bearings, there are letter identifications to go with the connecting rods, and the letter identification on the crank along with the number identification on the connecting rod will give us our bearing size, which in turn is a color. Again, this crankshaft connecting rod pin is a letter B. This is a 3, so it's going to get a black bearing in it. So we have 3 3s and 1 2. So we'll have 3 pairs of black bearings and 1 pair of brown ones. Doesn't matter where they go on the crank. Doesn't matter. The number is not weight. It's the internal size here, so that's not going to make a difference as to how the engine runs. So it doesn't matter which journal you put it on, as long as it's on in the right direction with the right bearings, with the right chemicals, and tightened properly.
Yeah, super simple.
All those things. Each one of these connecting rods has these 2 dowel pins in it. So these 2 dowel pins fit into these pinholes in the connecting rod. That's to keep them from shifting in any way, shape, or form. This is how these connecting rods are built. There are other connecting rods, instead of putting these locking pins in place, what they do is they make the connecting rod and then they freeze it and snap it in half. So when they break it, it makes all these really fine teeth. And then when you put them together, like when you take those and you stick them together without the hardware in it, you literally you're like, that's called cryofracturing, and that's something that they do now because it actually lightens the connecting rod, because they don't have to put the pins in and they don't have to make them so wide down here at the bottom to hold those pins. They can make them a little bit lighter, and then they still have the same stay force without putting a locator pin in them. They're pretty cool. Now it states in the manual here to use a moly and oil solution when installing these. So it also only says to put them on the top half, put the moly solution on the top half. So these I'm just going to oil. And then I'll use the moly solution on the other half. Moly is kind of like rubbing compound. It has some grit to it. So if you put too much in here, it'll wear the bearing away real fast.
So you gotta be careful.
So you have to be careful, which is why you mix it with oil, lessen the amount of grit that is in it. And this is just to help these 2 metal surfaces mate to each other. Alright, so we have our case halves ready to go back together again. This is the hardware that holds the two case halves together directly around the crankshaft journal. So this is what holds all this stuff together really tight. I know these bolts look a little weird. They almost look like they're threaded twice, but this is the threaded part that actually threads into the engine case. This section here is spiraled to allow the bolt to stretch, and stretch at a very specific rate. So you can only use these once. So there are, there are 2 longer bolts and 8 shorter bolts. Here are my replacements, fresh in the bag, but I only got the 8 short bolts. I didn't get the 2 long ones. What we're going to do is we're going to put the case halves together. We're going to drop the 8 bolts in, and we're going to tighten them down to their first spec, which is not the stretch spec, it's just a snug down. And we're going to leave it like that so we don't have to redo all the gasket surfaces until the new bolts come in, and then we'll put the last 2 in, torque those down to their first spec, and then torque everything down to their final spec afterwards. I suck, and when you're digging through a total giant pile of parts, sometimes you miss things. How many times did we go through this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We've probably been through all these parts 3, 4, 5 times and still missed out the 2 long crankcase bolts. So I'm a dick. Let's move on. All right, that's it for now.
So day 3 done?
Day 3 done.
See you guys on day 4.
We are here back day, what is this, 3, 4?
This is day 4.
Day 4 with our engine. We have received our correct brand new pieces of hardware in the mail, or we actually had to go pick them up from the dealership. So we're going to swap out those 2 bolts. We're going to continue on with our engine rebuild, starting with torquing all that stuff down to its proper spec, and then we'll just keep putting parts back on until there's no parts left to put back in this thing. So there is going to be a lot of little fine detail stuff along the way. That being said, the most crucial part we've already done, which was getting the crank and the connecting rods into the engine cases. So from here, it should be not too terrible. So we should be pretty close to an engine by the end of today. I don't think I'll be able to get the head on and the cams timed and all that stuff because we got a little bit of a late start, but we might have more time this week to do this again. So by the end of this week, we should have a completed engine. So I guess I'm just going to jump into this thing. You guys have seen enough repetitiveness on this thing already, so I'm not going to go crazy going back over what I did already, and we're just going to move forward with replacing this hardware and getting this engine back together. So away we go. Did you find that manual yet? All right, all the main journal hardware is now torqued, and the crank spins very, very nice and smooth. Very nice. Okay, moving on. So the next section of this is going to be install the small hardware that holds the cases together every place else. So in the manual, it remind you to replace the sealing washers, which are these little copper washers, and they are marked on the case with a little triangle. If you want to try and come over here and take a look at that, it's going to be a little difficult to see. So that little triangle denotes that there's a copper washer or sealing washer that goes here. There's our washer. There's our bolt. These are still all engine case bolts, but these are all the smaller ones that holds the rest of the engine cases together except for the stuff around the crank. So the crank has to be very heavily torqued so it can't move inside the cases. The rest of the cases just have to hold everything together so they don't leak oil. We are just dropping in all of these, I don't want to call them secondary bolts, but that's kind of what they are. Okay, so the cases are now together. Now we get to move on to installing some other good stuff like pistons and cylinders. So I'm going to move over to that side. I'm going to move the cylinders. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to assemble the pistons and rings right here, and then we will move on to mounting them onto the connecting rods. And then we get to put the cylinder gasket down and slide the cylinders over all 4 pistons at the same time. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Not really, but okay, let's move on. I don't know if you guys could see this little picture here, but this explains to you the order in which the 5 rings for your piston go in. All right, so there's 3 grooves in your piston. Top, middle, and bottom groove. The top ring has 1 letter stamped on it. It is just an R. And when you install the ring onto the piston, the R needs to be facing upward. The second ring has an RN stamped on it. And then the third ring is the oil ring, is 3 separate pieces. So when you put the oil ring in, you want to put this wavy ring in first. Try and do this without damaging anything. They are pretty fragile, as you can probably tell. Alright, so this one goes in first, and then you put one of these rings over and below this once it's on the piston. So we'll go ahead and start working on this, and then when you put these together, wherever the space in the ring is, they can't all be lined up. You don't want these spaces to be lined up with each other. You want to rotate them in a way so, you know, your top ring is here, your second ring is there, and your bottom ring is someplace in the middle, almost making like a Y between all those points. I like to start with this ring, and it does say to oil your rings as you put them on. So I am going to give this a dab once I get it in here. There we go. Okay, now you just want to make sure that there are no markings on these. So I'm going to try and get the one on the bottom in here first. Alright, looks like that one sat all the way in. Now we'll get the second one in. Now what I was saying about these spaces here, you want to turn your ring. So when I put my next one on, I'm going to put the gap over here so the gaps aren't lined up with each other. So I got one gap here. Where's the other one at? And the other one's right here. So these are my 2 gaps, my 2 oil rings. Okay, so those are in good places. Now we can move on to our second or middle and top ring. We're going to do the middle ring first. And again, a little oil. We want to space out our gap. So I'm going to start this one up here towards the front a bit. Get it started right in its groove. Okay. And that one is now in its groove. All right, that's 1 of 4. Now that I've explained it, I'm just going to roll through it and you guys have fun watching. All right, so pistons are now assembled. Now we get to install one of the 2 piston pin clips. So these are the pins, okay? And then these are the clips. All right, and so what we do is we take this clip, you see the nice big gap in it there. That ring is bigger than the hole. So we need to squeeze it down and stuff it into the hole, and it'll open up into the groove in here. And that will keep the pin from sliding out. So once we get the 1 pin in, we can put it on the connecting rod, slide the pin through everything, and then put the second clip on. I kind of did this in the wrong order because the way the book is laid out, and it's been a long time since I put one of these together. It's significantly easier to put the pistons on the connecting rods, put the connecting rods into the cylinders, put the cylinders onto the engine, and then bolt the connecting rods onto the crankshaft. But to bolt the connecting rods onto the crankshaft, the lower half of the engine case has to be off. We'll just make things work, and we'll go from there. So we'll start with these. Putting these things in will definitely make you feel like your fingers are bleeding. They are super, super stiff pieces of sprung steel, and they are quite fiddly. And if you haven't done this a whole bunch of times, it can be a little bit frustrating. It's still frustrating, even though I know I've done this a bunch of times. This is probably going to suck. You don't want to put the opening from the ring in the little notch in the piston. You want to keep it offset. So I apologize in advance. There may be some cursing going on very shortly. That's one. So the piston is just kind of hung on there. We don't have the second clip in there yet. I don't know if I should put the clip on now while there's no piston in the way, which would probably make more sense. I should probably do that. What I probably should have done is I probably should have put the clip on this side on and then worked from the other side to put this clip on. But I'm gonna have to do it this way anyway with all these middle pistons, so. All right, that's one. So the cylinders are not part of the engine case. And honestly, the way the manual would tell you to do it, if it was laid out in chronological order as the way you were actually assembling this thing, it would have told you in the right order to put the pistons on the rods, put the pistons in the cylinders, slide the cylinders, pistons and rods down onto the engine cases, onto the connecting rod, and torque them from there. But it was so many steps ago that I could do that. Now that the engine cases are bolted together and I can't get to the connecting rods anymore, this is just the way that I'm going to have to do it. Rings are on, pistons are on, pins are in, circlips are in. The next step is going to be the base gasket, and then the cylinders will go on. We played the put it together, take it apart, put it together game today to get the pistons, rings, pins, circlips, connecting rods attached to the crankshaft, which now is all inside the engine cases. Cylinders on, oil pump is on, oil pump, drive gear, and chain is in. New oil pickup is on, oil pan is on. So from here we start adding on the accessories, which are the flywheel, the clutch, the starter clutch, all that other good stuff starts getting bolted on, only to a certain point to help with the timing so we can get the top end finished off. So we'll put the flywheel on, we'll put the clutch basket on, and I think we have to put a couple of these drive gears up on this front shaft on to get our timing. And then we can put the cylinder head on and then finish the motor off. It should only take, I don't know, maybe another 3 or 4 hours of work to get this thing finished off, hopefully, because I'm tired of looking at it. All right, I'm done. We move on. Hasta mañana. All right, everybody, back again here at my lovely little motorcycle lift engine assembly workstation. I just went through some of the manual to make sure that I don't play the put it together, take it apart game again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by loosely installing the flywheel, which is on this side of the engine. Then we're going to move back over here and we're going to start installing the rest of the driven accessories, meaning the clutch, starter clutch, the flywheel, all that stuff. This is the gear that runs the cam chain. All that stuff is going to get installed at this time, and we're going to get everything prepped to get the cylinder head on. And then once the cylinder head is on, we can time and drop the cams in, and once the cams are in, the engine is pretty much assembled. So that's the plan for today. Install all the accessories, cylinder head, time the camshafts, drop them in, and be done with the mass exterior part of the engine. There will still be some fine small stuff that'll need to go on before we install it, but just to make sure that you could see everything here, we're not going to do that today. I'm talking like the oil cooler and all the cooling lines and stuff like that. We don't need to do that now. So we're going to start with the flywheel. I'm going to spin this engine around so you guys can see what it is that I'm working on. Okay, there we go. So this is the outside edge of the crankshaft where the flywheel, which is also the rotor, half of the charging system is going to be installed. Just pull this out. I'm not sure if these threads need to be oiled or Loctited. I'm pretty sure they need to be oiled, but we'll verify. What I do know is we need to clean this shaft spotlessly clean, and then I have a new Woodruff key here to line all that up, so I can get myself a nice clean rag. Very important when you're installing a flywheel onto your crankshaft, you want to make sure both of the mating surfaces are spotlessly clean. So I have a clean rag and some contact cleaner. I'm going to clean the mating surfaces up, drop in the Woodruff key. I won't be able to torque it down until I get some stuff on the other side, but I'll loosely install the bolt at that time and we'll move it back over to the other side. So let's get this cleaned up and installed real quick. Okay, so flywheel is on. I don't believe there are any timing marks or anything on this side, so I could actually put this cover on too. So I may as well do that while I'm here. We just finished torquing the flywheel on. Now we're going to install the stator into the cover, put the cover on the engine. Alright, got this side on. I don't know if I'm going to put the starter in now. Oh, that's actually the water pump. Maybe I should put the water pump in now while I got the chance. I didn't pull it out. Let's not bother. We don't really need it right now. That's not really part of the running of the engine, so I guess technically it is, but technically it's not. So we're going to move onto the other side of the engine so we could start putting some of these other accessory parts on. So just real quick, reiterate, flywheel's on, stator is in, cover is on, everything is torqued, Loctited, and sealed. Moving to the other side. This lovely bin in front of me has, let's see, we have shift arm, so part of the shift linkage, the part of the clutch, and the starter assembly. So it's a starter clutches in here, and then there's an idler gear and whatnot. So there's a bunch of stuff in this that has to go in here, and we're going to do that now. So here we go. We're going to start with the stuff that goes behind the clutch. So this is the gear for the oil pump drive. This is the center collet or spacer. This is what this runs on an oil bath. There's little holes in it, so oil pressure keeps these two from wearing each other out. But to get this on the chain, if you put them together and try and slide it on, then your chain's not going to fit over and onto the gear. So to get that on, you leave the center spacer out, you put just the gear on, and that gives you that little bit of space you need to get the chain on the gear. Come on now. There you go. And then we'll go ahead and oil this up nice. All right, these little teeth on here face outward. Just go ahead and slide all that together. Now the chain is on, and that's gonna not drive anything because that's a transmission shaft, but this will drive the chain as the clutch basket spins. So the next step is our basket, and then I'm gonna clean the basket real quick, and then the basket will go on next. Now what I just did there is I needed something to turn the crankshaft so I don't know if you can see it in here, but this is the drive gear off of the crankshaft for the clutch basket. And there was a web, I'll just turn it so you guys can see it, a web of the crank that was in the way like that. So I couldn't get the two lined up, so I just had to turn the engine far enough to clear the webbing of the crank and expose nothing but gear. I should be able to align and install the clutch. Okay, so we're gonna hold off on doing the whole soaking the clutch plates and whatnot for now, just because it's a total mess and it is not necessary for us to continue on. I know I'm kind of bouncing around here and it seems a little crazy, so I'm going to stop for a second and I'm going to talk you through what's going on. So I've decided that I'm not going to continue on with installing the rest of the clutch parts because it's going to make a huge mess and I don't really need it. As long as I have all this stuff in here lined up and the gears mated, I can continue. Before I put the gear on the end of the crankshaft, which has all the timing marks on it, I need to install the cam chain and then the cam chain guides. Chain is on, the guides are here. I'm looking for the hardware for the guides, which should be in this bag right here. And then before I do all that, I want to make sure that I install the starter gear so I can kind of mess around with these and get everything lined up so it's not super difficult. So I'm going to pause for a second, find this O-ring in my mess of O-rings over here, and then I'm going to move on. This is our new, brand new, and then sent out and got machined cylinder head, and then came back, also has new camshafts. The kit also came with velocity stacks for the inside of the airbox, high compression head gasket, and a manual cam chain tensioner. And believe it or not, the difference between these two are, you know, they look very, very similar, right? It's almost like, how do you tell the difference? Obviously they're mirrored of each other right now, but The major difference in these two is that the metal that these gaskets are made out of, because they're two stamped sheets of metal and then they're riveted together. The metal they use on these gaskets are probably half as thick as the metal they use for these gaskets. So may only be microscopic amounts, you know, very, you know, hundreds or maybe tenths of a thousandths of an inch difference, but when you're talking about combustion chamber size, that makes a difference. And it allows for higher compression, which makes more power. So here's our high compression head gasket. So these are our new camshafts, and what they have done, actually they feel pretty light too, but they have a different profile to the cams themselves, to the lobes of the cam. So they are actually a little bit taller, and as the cam rotates around, it opens the valves up a little bit faster and opens them up a little bit slower and closes them a little bit faster. So just to help everything flow better internally. So that in conjunction with what was done physically inside the cylinder head, which I'm going to show you in a second here. And I can't just take this cam and flip it upside down because all the buckets and shims are installed. So I'm only going to give you about this much right here. Now, if you could see inside of here, what they have done is they have opened up these passages by grinding out some of the metal. They've ground away to a very specific shape and dimensions the passageways for the exhaust, which allows for the bigger cams to do a better job of expelling exhaust gases out of the engine. And they did the matching work to the intake side as well. So they've opened up both the intake and the exhaust ports within the cylinder head to allow them to flow more air in, more air out, along with a taller camshaft to open the valves taller or open out valves further. Will allow this engine to breathe a lot more, you know, air fuel mixture in and exhaust out, which translates to more power. So this thing should make a nice chunk of power more. Pretty excited about that. So we're going to continue on. We're going to get the cylinder head on, and then we're going to get the cams in and get them timed. Cylinder head is installed. Everything has been torqued to its proper foot-pounds plus angle. I just wanted to come down here and verify that our crankshaft is at top dead center according to the timing marks here. We're going to move forward with the cam installation. So once the cams are in, technically it's an engine. I do have to put the cams in, the cam caps on, cam chain tensioner in, and then technically we have an engine. It's all the good stuff that's really, really important. You guys have seen me go through, inspect, clean, lube, assemble, torque, Loctite, grease, all that other good stuff along the way. So we're going to get you finished up here, and we'll give you a little talking to before we get out of here. But this should be the last section for now until we're ready to put this thing back in the frame and we can finish off the last little tidbits that you guys have seen us do already. So let's get to the camshafts and be finished with this video already, man. got all the bolts for the caps started. I don't really like to put too much pressure on the first go round, but they are numbered. So we're gonna follow the sequence to make sure that we don't break anything. And you only wanna sink them down a tiny bit at a time. You don't wanna drive all the way one all the way in, drive the next one all the way in. It's a little bit at a time, little bit at a time, little bit until everything is seated, and then you torque it. Get in there, motherfucker. What the is going on here? What's going on here? This tensioner doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. It doesn't look deformed anyway, does it? Oh, fuck yeah. Okay, so we're done for today. Hello everyone. Back on our CBR1000 engine, doing those last couple things that we didn't actually get to the other day. We have our cam chain tensioner that we're going to install. We're going to verify that our timing is correct. We're going to put our valve cover back on. And I just looked at this and remembered that we still have to install the studs on the engine too. So we'll do that today too, and then our engine will be complete and ready to go back into the frame. So I guess we'll start right here. Actually, we should probably start with getting the manual open, because I need the specs for the torque on these bolts, which they're probably not going to give me, and they're probably going to be 9 foot-pounds anyway, but we're going to check. Everything turns, nothing interferes. Reset the timing, verify everything is where it should be, and we're all set. Timing is good, timing on the crankshaft is good, cam chain tensioner's in, chain is nice and tight, everything's been torqued. Now we can put our valve cover on. So we have brand new valve cover gasket to go along with our valve cover. Before I put this on, just here where the little caps are for the divots in the cylinder head for the ends of the cams, I'm going to put a little bit of gasket sealer on those, just because oil can puddle there and then make its way out, and you'll wind up with an oil weep on the cylinder head. So let me grab some gasket sealer. Now, if this was a used gasket, like if this was a gasket that we were putting back on after doing an inspection or something like that, I would probably put gasket sealer all the way around on this, but being that it's new and it's all nice and super soft and pliable, I'm just going to do these little areas around the ends of where the camshafts are, and that should be plenty. Those are different. I'm confused. Something's definitely not right with that. Okay, so we can't put the studs in. They all have the same part number on them, but they are two very, very different studs. So I guess we'll skip this part and we'll have to get back to this later. That's how they would go in, but because there's half of one stud and half of another, we're not going to be able to do that right now.
It's the same part number.
Yeah, that's a mistake as far as the packaging. And stuff like that happens.
Oh, really?
Either the package will be mislabeled, which is probably what happened, is the label went on, but it's stamped with the right part number too. So there was a mistake somewhere in the, probably in the packaging when they did it, and that sneaked by somebody. Okay, so there's our engine, complete, turns over, cams are in, everything's timed, all the new fresh stuff inside. We do still have, you know, a couple small accessories that have to go onto it, like oil cooler, oil filter, not important to do right now. We could put that on when we're ready to put hoses on the engine. We do still have to put the clutch pack in, but again, that's a very messy, oily kind of time. So when this is already back in the frame and we can make a mess underneath the engine instead of on it while we're working on it. And we're pretty much all set with our engine for now, until it's ready to go in the frame, which hopefully will be sooner than later.
Okay, Brian, how do you feel now having got this engine put back together? How does, like, are you like totally sick of it, or are you like, thank God?
It's nice to not have a giant pile of parts laying around. That definitely takes a little bit of stress off, but until you can push a little red button and this thing spins around on its own, it's not done for me. You know, I'm relieved that I don't have a giant pile of parts to remember how to put back together. If you're disassembling because it's got like an oil leak or something, take it apart, fix the oil leak, put it all back together with all the same parts, anxiety level is substantially lower.
But this is totally
This thing went bang.
So hopefully you guys now have a better idea of what it takes to rebuild an engine literally from pieces. Stay tuned to see how long the anxiety stays. Hey! We figured it out.
But let's look at this one.
Sir! Hello, sir!
So at least we know that we need to order the MM5s, and we should get the right ones as long as they pick the part right.
Alrighty, make sure to like the video if you appreciate Brian spending an entire week of his life putting this engine back together, and subscribe. Oh, if you want to win one of our I'll speak words for him. If you want to win one of our other machines that we're building on this season, check the link below. We're building a CBR300 into a flat tracker and a 600 into a race bike in street clothing. So, hey! See you on the next one!
See you guys on the next one.
Chase might not make it.
Outro, do I have anything for that? I'm sorry, my brain is a little fried right now after you know, 18 hours of traveling yesterday. Do you guys think that the cylinder head should stay silver, or do you think it should be black? Let us know. Put your comment down below, and don't forget to use the OC.